6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, under the harsh restrictions that limited their expansion and military development. Captain Ben Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the cargo vessel Terra Nova, watching the loading docks of Station 7 through the main view screen. His ship was one of only 12 human vessels, permitted to operate in Council space, and every movement was tracked and recorded by alien monitoring systems. "Another inspection team coming aboard," reported engineer Katie Walsh from her position at the engineering console. Her voice carried the frustration that all the crew felt about the constant searches and delays that made their work nearly impossible. Navigator Tony Chen looked up from his charts with tired eyes. "That makes 4 inspections this week, and we are carrying nothing but medical supplies and farming equipment to the colony on Kepler 7. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The aliens made it clear that humans were barely tolerated in their space and treated every human ship like a potential threat. The cargo holds were searched repeatedly. The crew questioned about their destinations and purposes, and delays were common as alien bureaucrats found new reasons to hold up human shipments. On the other side of the galaxy, Intelligence Officer Helen Brooks sat in her small office aboard the research station Harmony Point reading reports that made her stomach turn. The attacks on human colonies had started small, with what appeared to be random pirate raids, but the pattern was becoming clear to anyone who looked closely at the data. The first attack hit New Eden Colony 3 weeks ago. Raiders calling themselves the Draknari Syndicate had destroyed 2 farming settlements and stolen supplies before disappearing into hyperspace. The Colonial Defense Force was too small and poorly equipped to pursue them. The second attack came just 5 days later at Freedom Ridge, where the raiders struck the main power station and communication array before vanishing again. The timing was too precise and the targets too specific for random pirates. Brooks pulled up the most recent intelligence reports from her contacts in the alien trading networks. The Draknari were definitely behind the attacks, but they were not acting alone. Intercepted communications suggested someone was paying them and providing information about human defensive capabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez walked through the ruins of the Hanson family farm on New Haven Colony, his boots crunching on broken glass and scattered belongings. The Draknari raiders had hit this settlement just 2 hours ago, and the damage was extensive. 5 colonists were dead and twice that number wounded. "Sir, we found something," called Sergeant Mary Collins from inside the burned remains of the main house. She held up a small device that did not match any known human or pirate technology. Martinez examined the device carefully. It was clearly alien in design, with the flowing curves and crystal components favored by the Zephyrian Empire. What was Zephyrian technology doing at the site of a pirate attack? He handed the device to his communications specialist with orders to analyze it immediately. The attack pattern troubled Martinez more than the technology. The raiders had struck fast and hard, but they seemed more interested in testing human responses than stealing valuable goods. They had attacked the Colonial Defense Post first, studied how the humans fought back, then withdrawn when reinforcements arrived. Dr. Amanda Foster tried to focus on her research in the xenobiology lab aboard Harmony Point, but the conversation at the next table made concentration impossible. 3 alien researchers were discussing humans in voices loud enough for her to hear every word. "The problem is they breed too quickly," said the Vorthak scientist whose name she did not know. "In 50 years they have expanded from 1 world to 20. In another century they could number in the billions." The Krillian researcher made the humming sound that indicated agreement. "Their adaptability is also concerning. Most species require generations to adjust to new environments, but humans can colonize almost any world within a few years. Perhaps culling would be appropriate," suggested the third alien, a Nexari whose red skin glowed brighter when he was excited. "We could arrange for increased pirate activity in human space or engineer a plague that targets their specific biology." Foster felt cold despite the warm air in the lab. These were respected scientists from advanced civilizations discussing the genocide of her species, like it was a routine pest control problem. She pretended to work while recording everything they said for her report to Earth. The economic pressure was as brutal as the physical attacks. President Claire Johnson stood before the Terran Federation Council in the capital city of New Geneva, explaining how alien trade restrictions were strangling human colonies. "They have raised tariffs on essential supplies to impossible levels," she said, pointing to charts that showed the devastating numbers. Medical equipment that cost 100 credits last month now costs 2,000. Terraforming equipment has tripled in price, and food imports are being delayed for weeks by new inspection requirements. The Zephyrian Empire controlled most of the major trade routes, and they used this power to make life difficult for human colonies. Ships carrying supplies to human worlds were delayed, searched repeatedly, and often turned away for minor violations of regulations that changed without notice. Council member Robert Hayes spoke up from his seat in the front row. What about our own production facilities? Can we become more self-sufficient? Johnson shook her head. We are trying, but our industrial base is still developing. The aliens have had thousands of years to build their manufacturing networks while we have had less than a century. We need time to catch up, but they are not giving us that time. Back on New Haven Colony, Martinez received the analysis of the device found in the ruins. The results confirmed his worst fears. The technology was Zephyrian, but it had been modified with Draknari components and programmed to monitor human military responses during the attack. They are studying us, he told his aide as they walked through the Colonial Defense Command Center. Every attack is a test to see how we react, what weapons we use, how quickly we can respond. Someone is gathering intelligence about our defensive capabilities. His aide, Lieutenant Danny Kim, looked worried. Should we change our tactics, sir? If they are learning from our responses, maybe we should try different approaches. Martinez considered this but shook his head. No, we keep doing what works. But we also need to start learning about them. If they want to study us, then we should study them right back. On Earth, Admiral Morrison met with his senior staff in the secure conference room beneath the Terran Defense Headquarters. The reports from the colonies painted a clear picture of organized harassment and testing that went far beyond random pirate raids. They are probing our defenses and economic weaknesses, reported Colonel Patricia Hill, the intelligence chief. The attacks are too coordinated and too well informed to be coincidental. Someone in the Galactic Council is planning something bigger. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing human colony locations and recent attack sites. The pattern was becoming clear to him as well. The aliens were not just restricting human expansion, they were actively working to weaken human colonies and gather intelligence for future operations. What are our options? Asked General Chris Evans, the head of Colonial Defense Forces. Limited, Morrison admitted. The Council restrictions prevent us from building up our military forces or expanding beyond current territory. We are supposed to rely on Council protection, but it is clear that protection is not coming. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from Freedom's Rest colony. The message was brief and terrifying. A full Draknari battle fleet had emerged from hyperspace and was moving toward the planet. The Colonial Defense Force had 6 small patrol ships and a few thousand Marines to defend 50,000 civilians. Morrison looked around the table at his officers. Recommendations? Colonel Hill spoke first. We send everything we have. Council restrictions or not, we cannot let 50,000 people die. General Evans nodded agreement. The Third Fleet is 3 days away, but they could reach Freedom's Rest in 18 hours if they push their engines to maximum. Morrison made his decision. Send the Third Fleet immediately. Full military authorization, and send a message to the Galactic Council informing them that humanity will defend its people, regardless of restrictions. As the orders went out, and ships began moving toward the threatened colony, Morrison wondered if this was the moment everything would change. The aliens had been pushing humanity steadily toward this point, and now they would see what happened when humans decided they had been pushed far enough. On Nexus Prime, Elder Vexthal received the emergency communication about the fleet movement toward Freedom's Rest, and felt the ancient warning echo in his mind again. The other council members saw this as human defiance of their authority, but he was beginning to understand it might be something much more dangerous. The young predators were starting to remember what they really were. The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the void between star systems like a giant metal flower, with 12 arms reaching out into space. Each arm belonged to one of the major alien races that controlled the galaxy. The central hub glowed with soft blue light as ships from different worlds docked and departed in a careful dance that had gone on for centuries. Ambassador Kethera of the Zephyrian Empire walked through the main corridor on her 4 legs, her scales shifting from green to purple as she thought about the meeting ahead. The monthly Galactic Council session would discuss many things, but today she had something special to present. Her people had been watching a small blue planet on the edge of known space, and the creatures living there had started to worry some of her advisors. The council chamber sat at the heart of Nexus Prime, a huge round room with seats arranged in a circle. Each race had their own section designed for their specific needs. The Krillians needed cold air and dim light, while the Nexari preferred heat and bright flames. The Draknari delegation sat in their armored chairs, their reptilian faces showing no emotion as usual. Elder Vexthul of the Krillians was already in his place when Kithara arrived. His ancient form looked like a walking tree made of crystal, and his voice sounded like wind through caves when he spoke. He had been alive for over 3,000 years, and had seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. The other council members respected his knowledge even when they ignored his warnings. General Zor Malik of the Nexari entered the chamber surrounded by his usual cloud of hot air and sulfur smell. His red skin glowed like heated metal and his eyes burned like small suns. The Nexari were known for their love of war and their skill at making other races fight each other while they watched and profited. The meeting began, as it always did, with reports from each world about trade routes, border disputes, and requests for help with various problems. Kithara waited for her turn, and when it came, she stood and activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Fellow council members, I bring news of a developing situation in the Outer Rim territories, she said in her musical voice. A species calling themselves humans has achieved faster than light travel and has begun expanding beyond their home system. The display showed images of human ships, cities, and technology. The other aliens leaned forward to get a better look at these new creatures that walked on two legs and had strange pale skin with hair on their heads. They seem primitive, commented Warlord Thexfon of the Draknari Syndicate. Their ships are crude and their weapons are basic. Why should we concern ourselves with such weak beings? Kithara touched her control pad and more images appeared. They have colonized 17 worlds in the past 50 years and their population grows rapidly. Our scouts report they have developed terraforming technology and are very good at adapting to new environments. Elder Vexthul made a low humming sound that meant he was thinking deeply. Something about the images bothered him, but he could not remember what it was. In his long life, he had seen many species rise from their home worlds to join the galactic community, and most followed similar patterns. But these humans seemed different in a way he could not explain. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss and 3 figures in dark blue uniforms entered. The lead figure was tall with gray hair and walked with the confident stride of someone used to command. Behind him came a shorter female with brown hair, pulled back tightly, and a younger male with dark skin who carried a data. I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation, the lead human said in a clear voice. This is Commander Lisa Parker and Lieutenant Tony Chen. We come requesting membership in the Galactic Council on behalf of all humanity. The silence in the chamber stretched for several seconds before General Zor Malik began to laugh. The sound was like metal scraping against stone, and soon other council members joined in. Only Elder Vexthul remained quiet, studying the 3 humans with growing unease. You request membership? Kithara asked when the laughter died down. Most species must prove themselves worthy over many decades before even being considered for probationary status. Admiral Morrison nodded. We understand the process may take time, but we believe humanity has much to offer the galactic community. We have developed new technologies, established peaceful contact protocols, and successfully terraformed worlds that others deemed impossible to inhabit. Commander Parker stepped forward and activated a portable holographic projector. Images of human achievements filled the air above them. Cities floating on gas giant clouds, underwater colonies, space habitats that spun slowly to create artificial gravity. The technology was impressive but still seemed crude compared to what the established races possessed. Interesting, said the Vorthak representative. A being that looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes. But what can you offer us that we do not already possess? We offer cooperation, trade, and friendship, Morrison replied. Humanity seeks to learn from older civilizations and contribute our own knowledge and skills to the common good. General Zor Malik leaned forward in his seat. Or perhaps you could serve as laborers for our mining operations. Humans appear strong enough for physical work and numerous enough to be useful. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, though the environmental controls had not changed. Morrison's face remained calm, but something shifted in his eyes that made Elder Vexthul lean back in his chair. "We seek partnership, not servitude," Morrison said quietly. The council members exchanged glances and began speaking among themselves in their various languages. After several minutes of discussion, Kethara stood again. "The Galactic Council is prepared to offer humanity probationary membership," she announced. "You will be restricted to your current territory and forbidden from expanding beyond the outer rim. Your military forces will be limited to defensive purposes only, and subject to council inspection. All human ships must be registered and tracked. In return, you may participate in limited trade and cultural exchange." Commander Parker's jaw tightened, but Morrison simply nodded. "We accept these terms as a starting point." As the humans left the chamber, Elder Vexthul felt the nagging sensation in his mind grow stronger. He had heard something about a species like this before, long ago, but the memory remained just out of reach. After the session ended, he made his way to the deepest archives of Nexus Prime, where the oldest records were kept. The crystalline data cores hummed softly as he searched through millennia of stored information. Most of the records were routine reports and trade agreements, but buried deep in the oldest files he found fragments of text that made his crystalline skin glow with alarm. The words were in an ancient language from a civilization that had vanished before most current species had achieved spaceflight. The translation was incomplete but clear enough to understand the warning. "Beware the young predators who have learned to walk softly among the stars. Their kindness should not be mistaken for weakness. When threatened, they become something else entirely." Elder Vexthul stared at the text for a long time, wondering if he should share this discovery with the other council members. But the warning was thousands of years old and came from a dead civilization. Surely it could not apply to these primitive humans who had just joined the galactic community as servants. He closed the files and returned to his quarters, telling himself that old warnings from extinct races meant nothing in the modern galaxy. Colonel Ryan Thompson stood in the command bunker beneath New Geneva City, on Freedom's Rest, watching the tactical display with growing dread. 30 Draknari warships hung in space above the planet like predators circling wounded prey. His defensive force consisted of 2 companies of Marines, 6 patrol boats, and orbital defense platforms that had not been designed to face a full battle fleet. "Sir, they are demanding unconditional surrender," reported communications specialist Helen Murphy, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They want all colonists to report to designated areas for what they call processing." Thompson knew what processing meant from reports of other worlds that had fallen to the Draknari. The aliens would take the strongest humans as slaves and eliminate the rest as unnecessary. 50,000 people, including thousands of children, would die unless his small force could hold off 30 warships. "Send this reply," Thompson said calmly. "Freedom's Rest does not surrender. If you want this world, you will have to take it from us." The first bombardment began 20 minutes later. Plasma beams lanced down from the Draknari fleet, striking the orbital platforms and turning them into expanding clouds of molten metal. The colonial defense boats launched from their hidden bases in the asteroid belt, but they were hopelessly outgunned by the alien warships. Private First Class Danny Kim piloted his patrol boat through the debris field that had once been Defense Platform 7. His small ship carried only basic weapons, but he had volunteered for the mission that everyone knew was suicide. The plan was simple. Get close enough to the Draknari command ship to launch boarding pods and cause as much damage as possible before being destroyed. "Danny, you do not have to do this," crackled the voice of his squadron leader through the communication system. "Pull back and rejoin the formation." Kim looked at the photograph taped to his control panel showing his sister Sarah and her 2 young children who lived in the main colony. "Negative, sir. I am going in." The Draknari command ship was a massive vessel shaped like a spear with weapons bristling from every surface. Kim's patrol boat was smaller than one of its gun turrets, but he managed to avoid the defensive fire long enough to reach the hull. The boarding pod punched through the alien armor, and he found himself inside an enemy warship armed with nothing but a rifle and determination to protect his family. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Mary Collins led her squad through the ruins of the outer settlements, where the Draknari had begun landing troops. The aliens were methodical in their advance, using heavy weapons to destroy anything that might provide cover for defenders. But Collins had grown up, hunting in the forests of Earth, and she knew how to use terrain that others overlooked. They fight like machines, whispered Corporal Alex Rivera as they watched a Draknari patrol march past their hidden position. No creativity, no adaptation. They just follow their programming. Collins nodded and signaled for her team to move. The aliens expected humans to fight like the other species they had conquered, standing in formation and trading fire until one side retreated. Instead, Collins used tactics that had been developed in the forests and jungles of Earth, where humans had hunted creatures much larger and stronger than themselves. The first Draknari patrol simply disappeared. One moment, 12 alien warriors were advancing through the ruins of Henderson Farm, and the next moment they were gone. No explosions, no energy weapon fire, just silence where there had been marching feet and clicking communication devices. The second patrol found pieces of the first scattered through the wreckage in a pattern that made no tactical sense. The bodies had been positioned to look like they were still on patrol until you got close enough to see they were dead. The psychological effect on the remaining aliens was immediate and devastating. In space above the planet, Danny Kim moved through the corridors of the Draknari command ship like a ghost. The aliens had designed their vessels for their own 7-foot-tall reptilian bodies, and the passages were too large for efficient coverage by their security systems. Kim used maintenance shafts and cargo holds to avoid detection while planting explosive charges throughout the ship. The Draknari crew was trained for ship-to-ship combat and boarding actions by other military forces. They were not prepared for a single human who fought like a predator stalking prey through an alien forest. Kim had grown up playing hide-and-seek in abandoned buildings and hunting deer through thick woods. Moving unseen through a spaceship was just another version of the same skills. By the time the aliens realized they had been boarded, Kim had reached the reactor core and armed the charges he had been carrying. The explosion would destroy the command ship and disrupt the entire fleet formation. He thought about Sarah and her children one more time before triggering the detonator. The destruction of the command ship sent shockwaves through the Draknari fleet, both literally and psychologically. These creatures had been told that humans were weak primitives who would surrender quickly when faced with superior force. Instead, they were fighting with a creativity and viciousness that the aliens had never encountered. Colonel Thompson watched the tactical display as 3 more Draknari ships broke formation and began retreating toward the edge of the system. The aliens were used to fighting enemies who followed predictable patterns, but humans kept doing things that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Draknari fleet commander," reported communications specialist Murphy. "He wants to negotiate terms." Thompson smiled grimly. "Tell him the terms are simple. Leave our system immediately or we will destroy every ship in his fleet." The alien commander's response was a mixture of outrage and disbelief. "You have lost most of your defenses and we still have 27 warships. How can you threaten us?" "Because you do not understand what you are fighting," Thompson replied. "You came here expecting to conquer farmers and shopkeepers, but you found something else instead." On the planet's surface, Mary Collins and her squad had eliminated 6 Draknari patrols without losing a single Marine. The aliens were beginning to group their forces into larger formations and calling for orbital bombardment, support rather than risk more small unit encounters with the human defenders. But the bombardment never came because the Draknari fleet was dealing with problems of its own. 3 more ships had suffered mysterious systems failures that the crews could not explain. Weapon systems shut down randomly. Life support systems fluctuated, and navigation computers began showing false readings. Captain Nicole Turner of the patrol boat Eagle's Wing had survived the initial battle by hiding in the debris field around the destroyed orbital platforms. Now she was broadcasting the destruction of the Draknari command ship across all frequencies, making sure the entire galaxy could see what happened when humans were pushed too far. "This is Captain Turner of the Terran Defense Force," she said into her communication system while images of the exploding alien warship played behind her words. "Today the Draknari Syndicate learned something that other species should remember. Humans do not surrender and we do not forget." The broadcast reached Nexus Prime 3 hours later, where Elder Vexthal was, frantically searching through the ancient archives for the complete text of the warning he had found months earlier. The fragments he had discovered were just the beginning of a much longer prophecy that painted a terrifying picture of what happened when humans were threatened. They are pack hunters who became individuals, he read from the crystalline data cores. They are prey animals who became predators. They learned to use tools when they were weak and kept that knowledge when they became strong. Do not mistake their civilization for weakness, because beneath the surface they are still the creatures that survived ice ages and hunted mammoths across frozen plains. General Zormalik burst into the archive chamber, his red skin glowing with anger. Your humans have destroyed 7 Draknari warships and forced the rest to retreat. This defiance cannot be tolerated. Vexthul looked up from the ancient text with fear growing in his crystalline heart. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach to humanity. Reconsider? Zormalik's voice rose to a roar. They have violated council restrictions and attacked council-approved operations. They must be taught their place in the galactic order. And what if their place is not what we assumed? Vexthul asked quietly. What if we have been making a terrible mistake? The Nexari general dismissed this with a wave of his clawed hand. Impossible. They are primitives with crude technology and limited numbers. The council will authorize whatever force is necessary to bring them under control. As Zormalik stormed out of the archive chamber, Vexthul returned to the ancient warning and found the passage that made his crystalline skin dim with dread. We thought we were the hunters, but we were wrong. In the end, when their young were threatened and their patience exhausted, we learned that we had always been the prey. On Freedom's Rest, Colonel Thompson received word that the Terran Third Fleet had arrived at the edge of the system and was requesting permission to engage the retreating Draknari forces. He looked at the tactical display showing 17 alien warships fleeing toward hyperspace and made a decision that would change everything. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, but this time he was not requesting anything. The holographic display behind him showed 12 human fleets positioned around key alien worlds throughout the galaxy. Each fleet had appeared simultaneously exactly 72 hours after the attack on Freedom's Rest. The Terran Federation demands immediate reparations for the unprovoked attack on our colony, Morrison said in a voice that carried no hint of the diplomatic politeness he had shown 6 months earlier. We also demand the surrender of all individuals responsible for planning and executing this act of war. Ambassador Cathara rose from her seat, her scales shifting to an angry red color. You dare make demands of this council? Your forces are in violation of every restriction placed upon your membership. Morrison smiled, but there was nothing friendly in the expression. Our membership was conditional upon council protection of human colonies. Since that protection was not provided, we consider the agreement void. General Zormalik activated his own display showing the positions of council military forces. You have 20 fleets scattered across the galaxy while we have over 300. Your bluff is meaningless against such overwhelming numbers. Admiral Hill, please show the general what happened to the Draknari fleet that retreated from Freedom's Rest, Morrison said calmly. The display changed to show debris floating in space where 17 Draknari warships had been destroyed by the pursuing human fleet. But the destruction was not random. The alien ships had been systematically hunted down and eliminated one by one over a period of 6 hours. The engagement records show something interesting, Admiral Patricia Hill said from her position at Morrison's side. Your ships tried to surrender after the first 4 were destroyed, but our forces did not accept the surrender. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. The concept of refusing surrender was alien to most galactic civilizations, who fought according to ancient rules that limited the scope of warfare. That is barbaric, whispered the Vorthak representative. Civilized species do not slaughter enemies who seek mercy. Commander Lisa Parker stepped forward. Civilized species do not attack colonies full of children either. You have taught us that the old rules no longer apply. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Captain Kevin Murphy led the first wave of human ground forces through the capital city, while orbital bombardment cleared resistance from the surrounding military bases. The aliens had expected a conventional invasion with landing craft and large formations of troops. Instead, small human teams appeared throughout the city using technology the Zephyrians could not detect or counter. How are they getting past our defenses? Demanded Commander Veltar as reports flooded in of human forces appearing inside supposedly secure facilities. Our shields should stop any teleportation technology. His aide checked the sensor readings again. Sir, they are not using teleportation. Somehow they are moving through our city without being detected by any of our scanning systems. Murphy and his team moved through the Zephyrian government complex like shadows. They had studied the alien architecture and found that the tall, graceful beings designed their buildings with many decorative spaces that were too small for Zephyrians to use but perfect for human infiltration. The humans also brought something else that the aliens were not prepared for: the willingness to use any method necessary to achieve their objectives. When conventional weapons would not penetrate Zephyrian armor, human engineers designed new weapons specifically for that purpose. When standard tactics failed, human commanders adapted approaches that had never been used in galactic warfare. Major Julie Thompson discovered the evidence that changed everything in a hidden database beneath the Zephyrian military headquarters. The files contained detailed plans for the systematic elimination of human colonies and communications between council members discussing the best methods for committing genocide. "Sir, you need to see this," she called to Captain Murphy over the team communication channel. They were not just planning to restrict our expansion. They were planning to wipe us out completely. The evidence was overwhelming. The Draknari attacks had been the first phase of a coordinated campaign designed to test human defenses and identify weaknesses. Phase 2 would have involved simultaneous strikes against all human colonies using overwhelming force. Phase 3 called for the complete sterilization of Earth itself. Murphy transmitted the files directly to Admiral Morrison aboard Nexus Prime. Within minutes, copies of the alien genocide plans were being broadcast across every communication network in human space. The galaxy was about to learn exactly why humanity had stopped following the civilized rules of warfare. On the Nexari homeworld, General Chris Evans coordinated ground operations while Commander Sandra Lee provided orbital support. The Nexari had expected their superior technology and knowledge of their own terrain to give them advantages in defending their world. They had not expected humans to turn their own technology against them. "Sir, the humans have gained control of our planetary defense grid," reported a panicking Nexari officer. "They are using our own weapons against our forces." Evans smiled as he watched human techs reprogram alien systems. With the same creativity that had allowed them to turn asteroids into weapons and cargo ships into warships, humanity had spent centuries learning to adapt and improvise because they lacked the advanced technology of older civilizations. Now that adaptability was proving to be a greater advantage than any weapon. The Nexari military commanders had spent decades studying how other species fought wars. But humans did not fight like other species. They used psychological warfare, technological sabotage, and tactical approaches that seemed to ignore basic military principles. Until you realized they were winning. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez led the assault on the UE Draknari homeworld with a force composed entirely of Marines who had survived the attacks on human colonies. These were not regular soldiers following standard operating procedures. These were humans who had watched their friends and families die and were no longer interested in showing mercy to their enemies. "Remember what they did to the Johnson family," Martinez told his troops as they prepared for the final assault on the Draknari government complex. "Remember the children at New Haven. Make sure they never have the chance to do it again." The Draknari had built their society around the concept of strength through overwhelming force. Their military doctrine assumed that superior numbers and firepower would always defeat inferior opponents. They had never faced an enemy that responded to overwhelming force by becoming more dangerous rather than more compliant. Captain Roger Davis oversaw the systematic destruction of the Draknari military infrastructure, while ensuring that civilian populations were protected. The humans were not interested in genocide despite what the aliens had planned for them. They were interested in making sure the threat never materialized again. "Sir, the Draknari government is requesting negotiations," reported his communications officer. Davis checked the status of the military targets on his list, 90% destroyed with minimal civilian casualties. "Tell them they can negotiate with the War Crimes Tribunal after we finish here." Back on Nexus Prime, Elder Vexthal finally found the complete ancient warning buried in the deepest archives. The text was written by the last survivor of the Vorthok Empire, a civilization that had controlled much of the galaxy before humans had even developed agriculture. "We thought ourselves the masters of all creation," the ancient text read. "We believed that our advanced technology and superior numbers made us invincible. Then we encountered the young predators from the third planet of a yellow star and learned that evolution had created something we could not understand or defeat. They appeared weak when we first found them, struggling to survive on a harsh world with limited resources. We decided to test them, to see if they could serve our purposes. We took some of their young for study and eliminated some of their settlements to gauge their response. That was our mistake. We thought they would submit or flee as other species had done. Instead, they became something else entirely. They stopped being the civilized creatures we had observed and revealed the predators that had always lurked beneath the surface, like they came for us with a patience and creativity that our military minds could not comprehend. They turned our own technology against us, used our assumptions about warfare to their advantage, and showed no mercy to those who had shown no mercy to their young. By the time we realized what we had awakened, it was too late. They did not want territory or resources or surrender. They wanted to ensure that no threat to their species could ever arise again. They were very thorough. Vex Thule transmitted the complete warning to every member of the Galactic Council as human fleets continued their systematic destruction of alien military capabilities throughout the galaxy. Perhaps there was still time to convince the other species that further resistance would only make things worse. Admiral Morrison received reports from all 12 fleet commanders confirming the success of their operations. The major alien military forces had been neutralized and the evidence of planned genocide was spreading throughout the galaxy. Phase 1 of the human response was complete. 3 months after the human fleets appeared around alien worlds, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. Captain Roger Davis stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching human ships patrol the space around the station that had once been the symbol of alien authority. The 12-armed structure still gleamed in the starlight, but now it served a very different purpose. The new Galactic Council met in the same chamber where Admiral Morrison had once requested membership for humanity, but the seating arrangement had changed dramatically. Ambassador Grace Wilson sat in the central position once reserved for rotating leadership among the alien species. Around her, representatives of the surviving alien governments waited for permission to speak. The Zephyrian Empire requests authorization to rebuild their orbital shipyards, said Cathera, her scales now permanently dim with defeat. Our people need transport vessels for basic commerce and supply runs. Wilson consulted the datapad containing humanity's assessment of alien military capabilities. Request denied. Commercial vessels can be purchased through human suppliers according to approved specifications. No independent shipbuilding will be permitted without direct human supervision. The Nexari representative, a subordinate of the late General Zor Malik who had died during the siege of his homeworld, tried a different approach. Surely the Council recognizes our right to self-determination and basic defensive capabilities. The Council recognizes your right to exist under human protection, Wilson replied calmly. Defensive capabilities are now provided by Terran Defense Force installations on your worlds. You no longer need to concern yourselves with military matters. Elder Vex Thul, one of the few alien leaders who had survived the transformation, activated his translation device. Ambassador Wilson, perhaps we could discuss the possibility of gradual restoration of limited autonomy as our species demonstrate their commitment to peaceful coexistence. Wilson turned to face the ancient Krillian with something approaching respect. Vex Thul had been the only council member to warn his colleagues about the danger of provoking humanity, though his warnings had come too late to prevent the catastrophe. Elder Vex Thul, your people have shown wisdom in accepting the new reality quickly and completely, she said. The Krillian worlds will be among the first to receive expanded privileges under human oversight. The meeting continued for several hours as Wilson methodically addressed requests, complaints, and attempts at negotiation from the various alien species. Each response followed the same pattern. Humanity would provide protection and basic necessities in exchange for complete compliance with human authority. On Earth, President Claire Johnson addressed the Terran Federation Assembly in a speech that was broadcast throughout human space and transmitted to every alien world as a reminder of the new order. 6 months ago, our colonies were under attack and our people were dying while alien civilizations debated whether humanity deserved to exist, she said from the podium in the renovated United Nations building that now served as the capital of human space. We discovered evidence that these same civilizations were planning our complete extinction, viewing us as a threat to be eliminated before we could challenge their dominance. They forgot that evolution shaped humanity through millions of years of survival against impossible odds. Today, those who sought our destruction live under our protection, whether they want it or not. This is not conquest for its own sake. This is the establishment of a galactic order where no species will ever again face extinction, because others view them as inconvenient. The assembly erupted in applause, but Johnson raised her hand for silence. We did not seek this responsibility, but we will not shirk from it. Humanity will ensure that the galaxy remains peaceful, even if that peace must be enforced. Lieutenant Commander Alex Rivera patrolled the borders of what had once been Draknari space aboard the newly commissioned vessel Terra Victorious. His ship was one of hundreds that now maintained order throughout the galaxy, ensuring that the defeated alien civilizations adhered to the restrictions placed upon them. "Sir, sensor contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported his tactical officer. "Looks like a Draknari vessel attempting to cross into the neutral zone without authorization." Rivera studied the readings on his command display. The ship was small, probably a courier vessel or light transport, but any unauthorized movement by former enemy forces had to be investigated according to standing orders. "Signal them to stop and prepare for inspection," he ordered. "If they refuse, disable their engines and prepare a boarding party." The Draknari ship immediately complied with the order, transmitting identification codes and requesting permission to proceed to the refugee camp on Kepler 9. Rivera authorized the transit after confirming that the vessel contained only civilians seeking to join family members in the human-administered camps. This was the new reality throughout the galaxy. The species that had once controlled vast empires now required human permission for basic activities like travel between their own worlds. Their military forces had been disbanded, their weapons destroyed, and their governments reorganized under human oversight. Dr. Amanda Foster worked in her new laboratory aboard Harmony Point, which had been converted from a research station into a center for monitoring alien compliance with human directives. Her job now involved studying the psychological and social effects of the rapid transformation from galactic powers to protected populations. The Vorthak are adapting well to the new structure, she reported during her weekly briefing to the station commander. Their distributed consciousness allows them to accept collective decision-making more easily than species with individual leadership models. "What about the others?" asked Colonel Gary Stevens, the human officer now in charge of the station. Foster consulted her notes. "The Nexari are having the most difficulty. Their culture was built around dominance hierarchies, and they struggle with being subordinate to any other species. We may need to implement additional monitoring protocols for their populations." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Krillian homeworld. Elder Vexthul was requesting permission to share additional historical records that might be relevant to galactic administration under human authority. "Sir, he says he has found information about other species that tried to challenge dominant civilizations in the past," the communications officer reported. "He thinks it might help us understand potential future threats." Stevens authorized the transmission, and within minutes they were reviewing files that painted a disturbing picture of galactic history. Over the past 50,000 years, dozens of species had attempted to challenge the established order. All had been eliminated by coordinated action from the major powers. "They have been doing this for millennia," Foster said as she studied the data. "Any species that showed potential for challenging the status quo was destroyed before they could become a real threat." "Except us," Stevens observed. "We were too adaptable and too dangerous once we were provoked. They created the exact situation they were trying to prevent." On the former Zephyrian homeworld, Captain Kevin Murphy supervised the construction of a new human administrative complex that would serve as the regional headquarters for this sector of space. The building was designed to blend human functionality with alien aesthetics, symbolizing the new hybrid civilization that was emerging under human leadership. "Sir, the Zephyrian Cultural Committee is requesting permission to hold their traditional harvest celebration," reported his aide, Lieutenant Sarah Collins. "They want to maintain some of their customs under the new government." Murphy considered the request carefully. Human policy encouraged the preservation of alien cultures as long as they posed no threat to galactic stability. "Approved," but with human observers present and no gathering of more than 1,000 individuals at any location. This was the delicate balance that human administrators had to maintain throughout the galaxy. The alien populations needed to feel that their identities and traditions were respected, while remaining firmly under human control. Too much restriction would lead to resentment and potential rebellion. Too much freedom might allow the development of new threats. Admiral Morrison, now serving as the Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, met with his senior staff in the war room beneath Nexus Prime to review the ongoing transformation of galactic civilization. Current status report he requested from his intelligence chief. All major alien military capabilities have been neutralized, reported Colonel Patricia Hill. Industrial capacity has been reduced to levels appropriate for civilian needs only. No species currently possesses the ability to threaten human forces or other populations. What about hidden installations or secret development projects? Asked General Chris Evans. Hill consulted her datapad. We have identified and eliminated 7 attempts to establish covert weapons development facilities. The monitoring systems we installed throughout alien space appear to be effective at detecting unauthorized activities. Morrison nodded but remained concerned about long-term stability. What about psychological indicators? Are we seeing signs of acceptance or growing resentment?